Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset. I am your host, Michael Hingson, and today we have a guest who I'm really excited to to and talk about. We could talk about him, but I'd love to talk with him. So, Mason, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Hey guys, so my name is Mason, Mason Collawn for that matter, and I'm a fellow podcaster myself. I run NCMA podcast. I'm going to launch Voice of the Voiceless. I am a typical person who likes entertainment, Asian culture with a twist, and overall speaking in general as a medium to present me to myself I did.
So tell me about this Asian culture with a twist. That sounds intriguing.
So Asian culture with a twist typically includes two aspects of what the coverage of the podcast is. One is Japanese aesthetics and then Asian studies. So I take on different historical perspectives, like for example, when I did Western storytelling and Eastern storytelling, where I dissected each of the main stories that was in those civilizations, like Journey to the West with Asia, and the Odyssey with Western civilization. And then we compared them both and did a case-by-case study side by side.
So what got you interested in that?
I think it was really the anime, because I didn't realize I watched anime when I was younger, like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And then when I rewatched those shows, because I would, want to relive nostalgic days, I found that this is actually anime. So it's anime from Japan with Japanese culture. So by diving into Japanese culture, animated TV shows, I was able to have a broader aspect of, oh, so if this is Japan, and then they also touch on Asia, let's explore some aspects of Asia too. And just also history is something I like, so knowing about it and talking about it is pretty easy.
So dealing with anime and Japan and the culture and so on, did you watch all the Godzilla movies from Japan over the years?
I've seen a couple of them. I haven't seen all of them. There's a lot in the franchise, like Gotha and the God of all monsters. But the lore is very interesting because you got Mechagodzilla in there, and you have King Kong somewhere in there. But Godzilla is facing all these different beasts. But I really like Godzilla as a film to study. They use a lot of claymation in the formation of the movie sets in the early days.
Right. I remember the original Godzilla movie. I think it was 1955. Maybe it was earlier than that, but
yeah.
But I think it was around 1955. But it definitely, excuse me, definitely became part of the culture over the years. And then of course, it got picked up over here. The original King Kong versus Godzilla was a U.S. movie, not a Japanese movie. But everybody put their own spin and brought their own things to it. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's its own genre. It's kaijus. Means giant creatures.
Tell me something about you growing up, kind of the early Mason, if you would. Tell us a little bit about kind of your young background and all that, so people get to know you better.
So my younger background is I sought out negative attention when I was younger. I was misunderstood, and instead of positive reinforcements, I sought out the negative attention. So what I did with the negative attention was I would anticipate people and be the antagonizer. I got to the point where I didn't care what people thought. I just accepted that I am who I am, and I will live who I would to be, and if you don't like me, oh well.
Well, you are different in some ways than a lot of people. Tell us about that, because obviously you do have differences, and what people would say you have disabilities. Um, Although I would argue that disability does not mean lack of ability. So just so you know where
But
I'm coming from. But tell us
disability, lack
about you
of
and
it.
all that.
So I was diagnosed with Asperger Syndrome disorder. So before that became autism as a whole, because they changed ASD to autism syndrome disorder instead, because they just did one umbrella. I was high functioning. So in that community, high functioning was seen as you're average, but you're socially awkward. You can do some things, but you still have some small discrepancies that people can pick up on. But these people picking up on it might not see it necessarily in a normal, more severe case of autism. I was a less severe case, so that's how that was. I was able to function more. Academics was high. Typically, I only had one area I struggled, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But political correctness now is they don't use the term high functioning because it creates this different learning curve that's applied to other people, because people on autism and the spectrum learn on different ways, and there isn't just one person who's high functioning or a mild case or a severe case. All of them interact and have the disability in a different way.
And so you have other disabilities, or
I have also ODD,
I'm sorry.
oppositional defiance disorder. So
Okay.
I would oppose authority, and I would be combative or potentially like to get in an argument, and I'm more
Hmm.
prone to it than, say, a normal neurotypical person.
How do you deal with that?
Um, Lots of trial and error. If one thing doesn't work and the same thing keeps happening, I would talk it out and eventually figure out a solution. I know with my younger days when I wasn't working, ODD would trigger, and I would create situations where the management staff at Food Line that I worked at would also a lot of times intervene. We would have meetings, discuss what I did wrong, and talk about it. And at times it was like maybe I said something I shouldn't, or there was an outburst, or I'm just not speaking professional. So we had to take the time to address the issue and keep talking about it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still an ongoing thing, but it's got a lot better in some aspects. I'm not as openly defined. It's more like I misunderstand directions, or I might take the wrong context and react differently.
Well, I think there are a lot of people that do that actually.
Yeah,
But I hear what you're saying, and it's part of who you are, and
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. I have had lots of discussions with people about the whole concept of disabilities, and one of the things that I have said, especially over the last year, is that disability is not a lack of ability, but rather disability is a characteristic that everyone has. It manifests itself differently for different people. For most people on the planet, the disability that they have is that they're light dependent, and you don't do well without light. And that doesn't mean that you can't, but we are brought up primarily as light dependent people. We are brought up with you got to have light. And now with the fact that light is so available on demand because of Thomas Edison the disability gets covered up a lot, but it doesn't mean that it isn't there. And so the reality is that it is a characteristic that everyone has, and it manifests itself differently for different people, but it doesn't make anyone less than anyone else. Or it
Well,
shouldn't.
yeah.
Or it shouldn't anyway.
Well, my manifestation of disability is through social skills, nonverbal communication, executive function, such as decision making. Like if I were to, this is a common example that could be applied to me. Stopped by a police officer. I'm more likely to be held up for questioning because they don't understand how to deal
Right.
with me. I'm
Right.
not trying to be a guilty party that they can suspect me as a guilt. Let's say I roll my eyes, not paying attention, or stuttering, or whatever is happening. They could determine that to be, oh, he's suspicious. He's a suspect. He is
Right.
hiding something.
Right.
So, with that being said, that could be is a real life situation where there's not enough awareness. If they don't know, they're going to treat me like I have a criminal tendency.
Right. They make assumptions and operate accordingly without really having enough information or knowledge about how to get the information that they need to have. And that's something that we see a lot. When I was born, and I was born 2 months premature, and when it was discovered I was blind, the doctor said, send him to a home because no blind child can ever grow up to amount to anything. And that is still all too often the way blind children and blind people in general are treated today. You're blind. You can't possibly be as competent overall as a person with eyesight. And that's just simply not true. But that is the way we bring people up.
Well, there's a different way of learning, a different way to go with it, but also navigation on without sight to get access to information that sighted people have.
Well, and the reason that they have the information is because there are a whole lot more sighted people than blind people. And so we make the world sight oriented. And it is very difficult to get society to change and recognize that we really need to be able to accommodate both categories, sighted and non-sighted, or any number of other different kinds of differences and accommodate them.
Non-neotypical and neotypical aspect as well.
Sure. And it's an issue to deal with. So, when were you originally diagnosed as, well, let's just use the general term, a person with autism?
So I had 2 diagnoses, one for severe developmental delay, and then the other one was autism itself. So from 18 months to 5 years, they were saying I was delayed, and that's how a developmental delay was my diagnosis. But then they found out that I was autistic at age 7, which changed their understanding of what the diagnosis I actually had to specific instances of they were overlaid. They were overlay similar. Because most psychological conditions are very similar, and typically throughout as you get older, you exhibit more symptoms of the one you actually have instead of the early on transgression.
Yeah. The issue is we're still learning to understand things like autism, although we're learning a lot. I've had people on this podcast who said they had autism, and it wasn't even diagnosed until they were adults because we just didn't learn enough about it soon enough.
Because a lot of people can have different diagnoses all at the same time. So there is no one-size-fits-all test to sync everything out.
Right. And again, it's a learning process, like with anything that makes anyone different. But the reality is we're all different in so many ways.
Yes.
And it
I
doesn't
just have to
need to be that
know
way, but it
what my
is.
differences are to constantly think about them and maybe analyze it differently.
Yeah. We're still learning to do that. And we're still working to get people to teach that to most individuals, but we'll get there. It just takes a while.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you seek out entertainment. What medium did you really decide was going to be the entertainment medium of choice for you, and why?
Well, my medium of choice was actually TV for the longest time, and it still is, and it's still a major factor in it. When I was a child, the only thing I had for entertainment was TV. So my only way to spend some extra time, if I wasn't doing physical activities and other stuff, was the TV. I would watch all my shows, I would watch movies, watch DVDs, watch stuff in the camper, go to the flea market, watch the TV in the trailer on Saturday night morning, and watch different cartoons, that type of stuff. As I grew up, the more TV I watched, it just became mainstream. I got older, it kind of went to streaming, but it's still TV related. So you can say that I changed from streaming from TV, but in reality, it's still shows that I'm watching. So it's still TV shows, most likely.
Mm-hmm. And that satisfied something in your psyche, I gather.
Yeah, it was how storytelling can be interesting. It can be compelling. There's different plots. There's different tropes. There's archetypes out there that can tell what is going on in a general sense, and they can apply that to the show, and you can see different patterns falling a line in the show itself.
Well, so for you, you've obviously watched a lot of TV. How do you think that TV has changed as a medium over the years? And has it become better or worse, or is that really a judgment anyone can make?
Well, TV has changed dramatically in the sense that not everyone is available to watch live content on the broadcasting as much. They rather there's been a change in focus to streaming, so they can watch this TV show with no ads. They can watch it anytime they want. Basically, video on demand has become the change that TV has tried to do, but it's different. That's
Yeah.
why cable services, just to compete, they have video on demand you can watch the next day on shows. That's why some TV networks, like Verizon, stuff like that, is able to compete with streaming because they have a service that's, video on demand.
Mm-hmm.
However, streaming will probably be the major market coming forward because people are realizing that access to all these channels is probably not worth the money you're paying. So these cable companies and satellite companies are behind the times, and they're trying to scramble to keep the buyers that they have.
Well, in reality, it's definitely changing, and you're right. Streaming has become so ubiquitous already, and I think people are going to have to accept that going forward. And it's going to be interesting to see how all that works out because you've got still different streaming companies that provide different content, and I wonder how that's going to be addressed over time because people ultimately really want to stream whatever they want to stream, and different groups have different things that are popular to them. I wonder how they're going to deal with all that. Do you think that companies are going to merge? Do you think that it's going to be that some companies are just going to license other content? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the major focus right now is for these companies to survive is acquisitions.
Yeah.
You see what happened with Disney and Hulu. Disney's now a two-thirds majority holder of Hulu. Paramount is potentially going to sell in the near future. They're going to potentially, look at Warner Bros. How many times did they get bought out? How many times did they go to Fox, you know, having different acquisitions is what these companies do. They liquidate assets, and with the anime streaming, we had Funimation and Crunchyroll. Sony already bought Funimation. They just merged Crunchyroll and Funimation together and made Crunchyroll the sole service. So that's kind of what they're doing. To
What do you
compete with big companies, they are doing acquisitions to meet the demand to stay, I guess, survive.
Mhm. What do you think is going to happen to the motion picture industry, which is, of course, a different animal, but
Ooh.
that's an interesting one. Where that's all going to fit into it, because again, people want to start streaming movies and so on. So where do you think motion pictures are going to go?
Well, there's already a decline in motion pictures as lately. Um, if they don't, if they keep releasing movies that is not necessarily an original idea, there's not going to be as much as a need to go to the theaters if you can just buy it online straight out. I mean, if it's available on like HBO Max and these movies are like, well, we are offering this movie on our platform, but it'll also be in theaters too. These platforms are moving to almost live rentals that you can do. So they're going into what Vudu used to be, which is a video catalog that you can buy a bunch of movies and TV shows that that might be where these movie companies are going to go. They're going to probably say, well, if I don't get an exclusive deal with this streaming service, then I want my content to be pay to watch instead. So the licensing agreement will probably be different.
The I guess the question is, over time, how much value will there be to having the theater experience, which is definitely going to have better sound, bigger screens, and so on than you can possibly do with your television? Will that make a difference overall?
Well, the theater will probably be nostalgic. So there'll be some around, but it won't be as big business as it once was.
Mm-hmm.
The transition from streaming is putting the theaters to potentially go to another audience. So they're going to go to independent movies now. They're going to try to have a large audience to view it, that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be more nostalgic. It's going to be like what theaters are doing now. They're doing multi-talent programs. They're not just doing plays. They're not just doing movies. They're doing concerts. They're doing talk shows. They're doing conferences to meet up their venue because their venue is accessible to many different events. So these movie theaters might have to slightly tweak the mainstream movies and maybe have to cater to other events for additional revenue.
Do you do you foresee the time that theater will just completely disappear, or do you think that won't happen?
I don't think it'll just completely disappear. I think people will want it for nostalgic. They would want it to have a more profound experience than just watching on the tablet.
Yeah.
Now, it's easier to watch on a smaller device, but who would want to spend a bunch of money on surround sound, like stereo system, just to be able to listen to it better? Like, most people don't have a home movie budget. Like, they don't have a room just dedicated to lounging around and having all this fancy sound equipment.
Right. Yeah, I tend to think that theater's going to be with us for a while, and
This is
that
going to change.
it will change. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Well, going back to you a little bit, how have has autism progressed for you? How have you changed, and how has as you grow older, you know, how has that affected you and autism?
It has affected me greatly. If I didn't have advocate in my mother, if she didn't completely take the time to understand what I needed for education, I wouldn't be here. Now saying that, I have transgressed to working with autism, so I have a job and doing it to keep working with autism, and then basically living with autism as a young adult. I've now
Mm-hmm.
accepted this part of who I am. It's not going to go away. It's definitely less impact now because of my executive function, lessons that I've had over the years. The awareness, the self attention, the dialogue, knowing how people react to me because I'm not like them. So that type of interaction has now been shifted a little bit because now I feel like I'm somewhat normal and just do my own thing. It's not really as a major aspect of my life compared to early childhood and say teen years.
Mm-hmm. So it's a progression, but it is something ultimately that you accept as a part of you, which is, I think, probably the biggest issue for any of us with anything regarding us, is acknowledging you are what you are and learning how best to utilize the gifts that you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I feel that people are not necessarily underestimated in any like and degree. It is really how you make you as a person benefit from what you have.
Right.
So if you are limited in this area, well, just do everything you can to get better. And if it's not copacetic, at least make it somewhat easier
Yeah.
than being totally difficult.
But that's a choice that you get to make, which is what's important.
Yes.
And it's all about making a choice, and it's all about knowing that you have a choice that you get to make.
It's your agency. It's really up to you to a certain point.
Right. Which is something that makes a lot of sense. And we we all need to do that.
Yes. If you don't, well, you might be left behind and have to catch up later in life.
Right.
And if you never catch up, you might just be lost along the way somehow.
Well, or you might not catch up in some ways, but you might catch up and surpass in other ways, which is which is part of what it's all about. As I have said many times, we all have gifts, and what we need to do is to learn to use the gifts that we have, because we're going to have gifts other people don't have, and that's okay. Which
Yeah.
is pretty important to be able to deal with.
Well, you need to know how to use a gift in a specific way to convey a message, convey that message, and be able to really strengthen what you have or had. Just figure out something that will work for you.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be the drastic change in life that you're looking for. It could be something unexpected, and you just find it by accident.
Right. No question about it. And it's really important just to progress where you can. So, what job do you have now? You said you have a job. What do you do?
So I'm in produce. I have worked up from a lead position from Food Line to a produce assistant leader at Kroger.
Oh,
I am part of the management at nighttime. So my responsibility is to work from 1:30 to 10 o'clock at night and make sure the department gets closed correctly for the next day for the morning people to be able to do the next stage of operations every day that we're supposed to do.
this is at a particular store, or is it more general than that?
I'm at a particular store, part of a bigger, it's called the Kroger Company. So it's part of a chain of stores
Right,
across the nation. But
right.
I'm at a particular store, uh, 510, which is mine. Uh, I'm actually able to, I have people under me for the nighttime. And as a assistant leader, it's my responsibility to make sure everything gets done, delegate if need be, and also anything they're not doing, me to do as well. And anything that might come up, like price reductions or questions that they can't answer, I need to be able to answer. And occasionally getting a manager involved if I can't help them, since I am technically the representative of management in that department at that time.
Okay. So at least you're progressing. You had a job. You've been promoted. What's next?
Well, um, typically what would be next if there's an opening at one point if I wanted to be a produce manager. I don't mind the assistant manager. I can probably do produce manager, but I would probably want a smaller store.
Uh-huh.
For me, Kroger's too big to be a produce manager because of the size compared to Food Line that I had. Food Line was a lot smaller store, so it was more manageable. So if I were to be a manager, I would probably want to choose a smaller store, but use my training that I have to be able to do that.
Do you find that when you're working at a larger store and for a larger company like Kroger, that also there's a lot more rigidity? Things are more rigid, and so there is not a lot of flexibility um, to maybe be creative or do things in a little bit different way than maybe the company would normally do it? Or is that even an issue that should come out in the corporate world?
Um, so typically in retail, corporate's going to have their TOS, the standard practice that is applicable to everything you should do. They have everything mapped out to time. So this comes back to business logistics. So their business science has already dictated how much time something should take and how much hours is allocated to do it. So anywhere you go, there's not going to be more creative. The only creative you could be is probably at a smaller local store level.
Right.
So a local store will probably be more creative because they're not dictated by the business science how to run your business efficiently.
Right.
But with compared to Food Line, there is more flexibility on some things because you're a smaller store, and sometimes you just don't have the space. You might have to, if pumpkins are on sale, you might have to keep them up longer to sell them down into the price, and may extend the time. Then at Kroger, you might not be able to do that. They tell you to take it down, you have to take it down. And you just have to take the loss of profit.
Yeah.
And seasonal change is pretty rigid over there. As soon as the season ends, for whatever, Thanksgiving, Halloween, they'll change to the next one, like almost 2 or 3 days before the actual holiday hits.
Well, the other side of that, though, is seasonal kinds of things.
Yes.
You know that. I mean, seasonal. So you expect that when it ends, it ends. So a lot of things like that do happen, especially with seasonal kinds of products. So different kinds of vegetables, different kinds of fruits, and so on are only good at certain times of year, or other kinds of products that are only related by our society to Thanksgiving as opposed to Christmas, as opposed to Halloween.
Yes.
Well, so in addition to working at Kroger, which definitely keeps you busy and helps pay the bills and keeps the lights on, we want you light dependent people to have the lights on. It's okay. Um, Tell me about your podcast world. So along the way, you decided to get into podcasting, and I should tell people that you and I met through Potapalooza. Um, I've talked about Potapalooza a lot on some of our podcast episodes, and we got to meet Mason at the latest Potapalooza, which was a lot of fun. And so, um, as he mentioned, I've been on his podcast, and we talked a lot about assistive technology and so on. And now we get to have Mason on ours and get a lot of insights, which is a lot of fun. But tell me about you and podcasting. Why did you get involved in it? What do you think it brings to you and your life? And what do you bring to the rest of the world?
Well, podcasting is definitely unique because uh, through my passion for TV, I was introduced to yearbook in 8th grade. All right? So 8th grade, I want to do yearbook. Cool. I go to high school, and the intro to communications is yearbook, newspaper, TV production. Well, instead of choosing yearbook because there's too much graphic design, spread, and all that stuff, I went with TV production. So I took 4 years of TV production, and in doing that, I learned how to do studio, set design, all that stuff. And I wanted to continue that after high school. But I didn't know how to format it correctly. So instead of podcast, because the podcast is not first, my blog, blog MC Anime was first. I wanted to write about anime reviews. I wanted to write about my favorite shows. I went to Facebook to do it, and then I was like, wait a second. My Facebook audience that I have is not, they don't know this content. So I made a Facebook page, Blog MC Anime. So that's kind of how my original Facebook got started, was through different mediums to blog.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became podcaster after that because I didn't want to do the blog anymore, but I still wanted to do something on brand, which as I was doing before. Podcasting has given me the insight to be able to talk. I've been behind the camera so much as it doesn't bother me. I have a personality that I want to share. I have a story that's compelling. And through being able to speak, it's like I'm overcoming a part of myself that tell people that I shouldn't speak, that you won't be able to speak. You'll be not understanding other people because you don't connect to them because you're socially inclined. And that's not true at all.
So, how do you see the world of podcasting evolving over time?
The world of podcasting has already grown tremendously. There's probably going to be so much competitive market that only the top 5% would be able to make a living off of it. Well, I see podcasting moving on towards a supplemental income unless you are able to convert your audience to a plug-in business that is tied to your podcast. So solely doing podcast is not going to pay the bills. Now, tying something in to your podcast, like getting discovery calls, like giving them services, selling product, affiliate marketing, that's going to be able to convert that audience to revenue. So that's where podcasts is going. Now, in the world of everyone keeps launching a podcast, I guess there's just going to be a slice of the pie that the demographic is going to give to certain podcasts. True crime is really good. Talk shows are really good. But you have to identify which podcast is going to be you. standing forth. Because you don't want to be a generic podcast if you
No.
don't have a good following.
The other thing that I find interesting, we started Unstoppable Mindset back in 2021, but by the beginning, roughly speaking, of 2023, although we had put video into every podcast, but the folks that we were working with who are involved with Potapalooza, Michelle Abraham and the Amplify You group, suggested that we should also put the podcast up on YouTube and as a result, make sure that it's a video podcast as well, because there's a growing audience that like to see the podcast. Now, I know that originally Steve Jobs and the whole idea behind the podcast was to have something that you could play anywhere. So if you're running or walking or out
Play on demand.
Yeah, whatever, you could listen. But do you think that there's a significant growing audience that need to have the video as well?
Yes. It's kind of the reason why I realized that YouTube was a good medium, because everybody was asking me, do you have a YouTube channel? I was like, okay, no, I don't. I'm sorry. But I start backtracking all my older content. I wish I started videos so much sooner, because it's so much easier to post. But instead, I backlogged season 1, 2, and 3 as audiograms. I'm converting it to audio to video, but I'm using a visual component to make it video, to make it more stand out. That is just...
Well, the whole idea of having a video podcast or having video for your podcast is a little bit new, but it is but it is certainly something that I think people have become accustomed to having around. So I'm not surprised at it. Radio became television. We like to watch things. And so the result of all that is that we need to make sure that we cater to the audience, whatever audience it is that we're working toward. So having the ability to have a video podcast is pretty important. And the other idea about having a video component to podcasting is that it's easy to do video. You can fairly inexpensively have a camera, a decent camera. You can have it be part of your repertoire of technology. But you also can have the whole aspect of making sure that everybody can interact with the podcast in their own way. So
Yes.
it's kind of fun. So having the ability to have video, I think is probably a pretty important thing. And I get actually probably more comments from people who have interacted with us on the YouTube channel than anything else. Even though the size of the audience is significantly less, but they're vocal.
Yeah, I found out my size of my audience is the 3 different graphics. I have the podcast downloads, which is really good, but I also have the YouTube as a video component, and I'm also using video on my Facebook as well. But then I also have the short-length content. So I am using short-length content to promote it, and actually people are liking it. I'm getting a lot of hits. However, that's good, but short-length content only promotes short-length content, so you still got to promote the long-form content, so it kind of becomes as well. I'm using the short-length content to potentially get more people, so if they get introduced, they might be able to be interested in a small percentage converted.
Yeah. So the short link content is probably what most people would understand the terminology more with sound bites. It's not large. And it isn't the way to present the majority of the content, but it certainly is a way, if you do it right, to get people interested enough to then focus on what you're doing and go from there.
Yeah, but I'm having lots of fun doing it. It's interesting how I'm doing my schedule now for uploads. I'm doing like 3 to 4 short length videos plus the episode upload. So that has drastically increased my social media uploading content. It's given a diverse catalog, actually. That's what I like about it.
Yeah. And do you think you're getting a lot of conversion from the short links to people listening to the whole podcast?
I'm definitely getting interested in different spikes of the episode. Though it's not as withstanding. Typically, to have a lot of converting from short length content, you had to, let's go about the YouTube algorithm. You need 3 million subscribers on a short length content channel, 3 million views in all videos to be able to get monetized. That's a lot comparing that you only need a minimum of 1,000 on a regular YouTube channel. So
Right.
there's a different demographic percentage of you need a bunch more people to convert it. So it only helps to promote you unless you're getting to like lots of followers on it. If you're not getting as many followers, it's just going to be like a good social media blast, that type of thing.
Right.
So it's hard to convert if you're not super successful. Because I'm getting like 1,000 hits, okay, 1,000 views. That's great, but that's not nearly enough to convert to the podcast. And with a lot of people, but I need a lot more people to view it.
Why do you think?
You typically need 5,000 to 10,000 to be able to convert a larger base.
Why do you think that more of those people aren't transferring over and observing the longer podcast?
Because their attention spans guided to the short length content. So the short length content is good, gave you greater access to people, but you need a greater number of people watching you to have a higher converting percentage.
Yeah, and the short links aren't going to give you real substance.
It's just going to be what is already seen. So
unless you just can come up with something so creative that it draws people to the larger podcast, but that's just not what happens.
Yeah, that's why you have these social media influencers. They're able to dictate an audience base on social media in a way that draw these people to these accounts.
Right.
That's good for them, but they're not podcasters. It can be, but not everyone is.
Yeah, mostly they're not. They do other things. Well,
but
so tell us.
Is good in that way.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Say again.
Oh, just podcasting is. YouTube is the long form content that was created on. So
yeah,
that's kind of what a podcast can do well.
So tell us more about your podcast then, and what typically you do on it, the kinds of people who you've had on, and also how can people find it and go investigate it.
So I've had a range of professional speakers to featured speakers who are my friends, who are like experts in that episode. So I like to incorporate people who are experts in the thing they're talking about. All right, that's kind of my philosophy. It's my job to highlight you, to speak in a way, to speak on the subject, we speak it together, and you also present your perception of what it is. And to find me on the podcast, you can go to https:// Facebook blog MC Anime. You can also find me at
spell that if you would.
What, the Facebook website or just the social media handle?
Whichever you'd like, so that people can get to the podcast.
So an easy way to search it is @ capital B LOG capital M, capital C, capital A, NIME. That is at BlogMC Anime. And that's an easy way to search me on Facebook and other navigations to. It's my landing page for the link tree. You can get my social media and that type of stuff.
And we will also make sure that things are in the show notes so that people can get it that way as well.
And it'll be at facebook.com/blogmcanime. That helps.
Right. Cool. Well, this has been fun. And I guess I would ask if you have kind of any final thoughts or anything that you want people to know, and if there are other things that they should be aware of about you, or any other kinds of ways they should be able to reach out to you. Why don't you give us any of that you'd like?
Well, as I'm learning now, there is no barrier. Through different aspects of different lives, you have the power to be able to do something. Now, if it's not what you want, and you are in a limited option, say a disability, or you're not as good, whatever, that's not going to stop you. You just have to keep trying until you figure something out that's be able to be successful for you. And those resources are out there to be able to do that. You just need to be able to connect to them, find someone who can help you if you're not able to navigate it, and just really have a strong ally and support base to move forward in what you're trying to do, or maybe the lack of, and you're trying to get better at it.
Mm-hmm. But I would say each of us knows or should know ourselves better than anyone else, so you know what you can do, and you can learn for yourself how much more you can do if you really work at it. So it is up to each of us to take a stand and work to move forward, don't you think?
Yes. If you don't know what you need, then who would know for you?
Yeah.
You are the most powerful advocate that anyone can have.
There you go. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. This has been a lot of fun. I think it's been very insightful, and I certainly appreciate your time, and I hope that everyone who has been with us appreciates all the insights and things that you bring to us. It's been a lot of fun talking about television and where it might go, and just media in general, and where people are going to be going to look for things in the future. It is we're in an evolving world by any standard, so it's fun to talk about that, and I appreciate your time to do that by any standard.
I'm proof that any standard can happen.
Well, we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you've got any thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to email me, Michael H.I., MICHAELHI at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. You're also welcome to go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is spelled MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. And Mason, if people want to email you, do you have an email address they can reach out to?
Yes. So my correspondence is at BlogMC Anime. It's the same as before, BLOGMCANIME@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me and communicate about collaborations, interviews, insight, all the 9 yards.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and we appreciate it if you listening out there would give us a 5-star rating wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. You have options to review. Please give us a 5-star rating. We value that greatly. And you, Mason, and all of you listening out there, if you know of anyone who you think ought to be a good guest on our podcast, or if you'd like to come on Unstoppable Mindset, we want to hear from you. We love introductions. We love hearing from people. So please don't hesitate to let us know if you've got any thoughts for guests. We are always looking for people who want to come on and tell their stories and help us show the world that we're all more unstoppable than we think we are. And with that, I want to thank you once again, Mason, for being here with us today and taking the time. Thanks very much.
Thank you for being here.